Please subscribe to my channel. This is my sincere request to you. I reserved exactly 2 front row seats and texted them that I would be looking down from the stage. Then the announcer read my name and those chairs sat empty as if I had never existed. 3 hours later, I saw them online screaming in jerseys at a Super Bowl party. By morning, my mother called to ask if I could wire them $9,800 immediately. I said yes, but this time I chose the law over love. My name is Nora Cook, at 29 years old, standing in the drafty to concrete staging tunnel of the Schottenstein Center in Columbus, Ohio. I felt less like a master's graduate and more like a lost child waiting for a ride that was never coming. The air smelled of floor wax, cheap polyester gowns, and the nervous sweat of 3,000 students. Winter commencements are strange affairs. They lack the sunshine and blooming flowers of the spring ceremonies. Instead, you get gray skies that look like bruise, sheet metal, road salt caked on your dress boots, and a pervasive chill that settles deep into your bones, ignoring the layers you wear underneath your regalia. I kept checking my phone. Then I kept checking the crowd. I'd had 4 tooth and nail for those tickets. Graduate seating is limited, usually capped at 4 guests per student. But I had bartered with a guy from the statistics department who did not have any family coming in from out of town. I traded him my shift notes from our shared elective and a $1.50 gift card just to secure 2 extra spots in the lower bowl. Section 104, Row G. I wanted the angle to be perfect. I wanted them to see my face when I crossed the stage. I had even printed little paper signs that said "Reserved for the Cook family" in bold black ink, taping them to the plastic armrests myself when the doors opened earlier that morning. From where I stood in the line, craning my neck over the velvet rope, I could see Section 104 perfectly. It was packed. It was a sea of parents in heavy coats, siblings playing on iPads, and grandparents clutching bouquets of flowers wrapped in crinkly plastic. It was a mosaic of pride and noise except for 2 distinct gray plastic voids in row G. They were just chairs, just molded plastic and metal bolts, but they looked like missing teeth in a smiling mouth. My phone buzzed against my palm, startling me. I looked down, expecting a frantic text about the parking situation. The garages around the arena were notoriously confusing, a labyrinth of spirals that trapped suburban drivers. I was ready to type out directions. I was ready to run out to the lobby to guide them in. Instead, the screen lit up with a message from Dad. "Stuck at work thing. Watching live stream. Good luck." That was it. No apology. No explanation of what kind of work emergency happens on a Sunday for a mid-level logistics manager at a beverage distribution center. No, we tried, just stuck. My father, Gavin, did not work Sundays, especially not Super Bowl Sunday. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me right there in the tunnel. I stared at the pixels until they blurred. I did not reply. There was nothing to say. If I typed, "Please come," I would be begging. And at 29, after putting myself through grad school while working full-time, I was done begging for things that should have been given freely. Nora Cook. The microphone boomed my name. It sounded distorted, hollow, like it belonged to someone else. I walked. I remembered the instructions given during the rehearsal. Walk briskly, shake with the right hand. Take the diploma holder with the left. Pause for the photo. I did it all on autopilot. I walked across the stage, the bright lights blinding me, creating a tunnel of white vision. I shook the hand of the dean, a man I had never met, and he smiled a practiced politician's smile. I smiled back, but I could not feel my face. My cheeks felt numb, anesthetized. The flash of the professional camera fired pop, and in that whiteout moment, I felt something inside my chest snap. It was not a loud crack. It was not a dramatic explosion. It was the quiet, terrifying sound of a tether finally giving way. It was the sound of a heavy anchor rope fraying and snapping underwater, leaving the ship to drift aimlessly into the dark. I walked off the stage, holding an empty leather folder that symbolized $60,000 of debt and 3 years of sleepless nights, and I looked back at Section 104 one last time. Still empty. They had not even bothered to show up late. Megan Price found me in the chaos afterwards. The lobby was a sensory overload of screaming families, flashes, and balloons. Megan was holding a bouquet of grocery store carnations that looked like the most beautiful things I'd ever seen because they were tangible proof that someone remembered I was physically present on this earth. She hugged me, crushing her velvet sash against mine, smelling of vanilla perfume and champagne. "You did it, God. We are finally done." She screamed over the noise of the recessional band playing a marching tune. She squeezed me tight, rocking us back and forth. Then she pulled back, her eyes scanning the crowd over my shoulder. "Where are they? I want to say hi to Mara and Gavin. Did they get good seats? I bet your dad is freaking out." The lie tasted like copper in my mouth. It was a reflex, a defense mechanism I had honed since childhood to cover for them, to make them look normal so I could look normal. "Traffic," I said. My voice was steady, which scared me. "I think they got stuck on I-7 coming down. There was a wreck or something near the outlet malls." They watched on the phone. Megan frowned, her brow furrowing. She knew Columbus traffic. She knew 71 was clear on a Sunday morning, but she was a good friend, the kind who knows when to push and when to offer a lifeboat. She let it slide. "Oh, that sucks." "Seriously." "Well, come on. My parents are taking us to the Pearl for oysters and drakes. You are coming. My dad is buying." I looked at her family behind her, her dad beaming, holding her diploma cover like it was a holy relic, her mom wiping tears with a tissue. It was too bright. It hurt to look at. "I can't," I said, retreating a step. "I have a headache, a migraine coming on." The lights on stage really triggered it. "I just want to go home and crash." "Nor," Megan started, a warning in her tone. "Seriously, I need to lie down. I'll text you later." I fled. I literally ran away from my own graduation celebration, dodging happy families in the parking lot, throwing my gown into the back seat of my 10-year-old Honda Civic. My apartment was cold when I got home. I had turned the heat down to 62 to save money on the electric bill while I was at the ceremony. I did not turn it back up. I sat on my beige sofa in my graduation dress, the silence of the room pressing against my ears. I did not cry. Crying implies hope, implies that you are sad because you expected something different. I just felt this heavy gray pressure like I was sitting at the bottom of a swimming pool. I pulled out my phone. I told myself I was just checking the time, but my thumb had a mind of its own. I wanted to numb myself. I wanted to doom scroll until my brain turned to static. I wanted to see strangers arguing about politics or cat videos. Anything but my own life. But the algorithm is cruel and efficient. It knows who you are related to, even if you wish you were not. The first thing that popped up was a story from my Aunt Sloane's daughter, my second cousin who lived in Dayton. It was a video. The location tag said Dayton, Ohio. The timestamp was 3 hours ago. Right when I was walking across the stage, I tapped the screen. The audio blared out loud music, the thumping bass of a classic rock anthem, and the roar of a crowd. The camera panned across a living room decked out in streamers and balloons shaped like footballs. There was a massive spread of food, buffalo chicken dip, trays of wings, sliders, a keg of beer in the corner, and there, right in the center of the frame, were my parents. Mom was wearing a jersey that was 2 sizes too small, holding a red Solo cup, her face flushed and animated. She was laughing, her head thrown back, mouth open in a wide cackle. Dad was standing next to her, high-fiving a man I did not recognize, his other hand clutching a beer bottle. They were screaming at the giant flat-screen TV on the wall. They looked ecstatic. They looked like people who were having the absolute time of their lives. The caption read, "Super Bowl warm-up. Go team." The cooks know how to party. They were not stuck at work. They were not stuck in traffic. They were 90 minutes away in the same state getting drunk and eating cheese dip. They had traded the proudest moment of my life, the culmination of 6 years of academic grind, for a pregame party for a football game they were not even playing in. I watched the loop 5 times. Mom laughs. Dad high-fives. Mom laughs. Dad high-fives. I put the phone face down on the coffee table. The silence in my apartment grew deafening. I could hear the refrigerator compressor kick on in the kitchen, a low hum that sounded like a dying insect. I could hear the wind rattling the loose pane in the bedroom window. I sat there for 4 hours. The sun went down, casting long skeletal shadows across the floor. The room turned black. I did not turn on a lamp. I just sat in the dark, still wearing the dress, letting the realization calcify in my chest. It wasn't just disappointment. It was clarity. It was the final puzzle piece clicking into place. They didn't just miss it. They chose to miss it. And they thought so little of me that they didn't even bother to hide it. They posted it. I must have fallen asleep sitting up because I woke up to my phone ringing. The sun was cutting through the blinds, sharp and aggressive. It was Monday morning. The screen said, "Mom." I stared at it. My stomach turned over, a mix of nausea and anxiety. I cleared my throat to make sure my voice wouldn't crack. I swiped green. "Hello, Nora. Honey." Her voice was chirpy, too chirpy. It was a frequency I knew well. It was her "I need a favor" voice, the one she used when she wanted me to talk to a landlord about a late fee or fix a billing error with the cable company because I sound smarter. "How are you? Did you sleep well?" she asked. She didn't ask about the ceremony. She didn't ask about the degree. She didn't ask if I was okay. "And fine," I said. My voice sounded dead. Good. Listen, sweetie. I know you're busy with the new job starting soon and everything, but something came up. A little hiccup." I waited. I looked at the dust motes dancing in the shaft of sunlight. "We need to borrow a little cash just for a few weeks until Dad's bonus clears next month. You know how payroll can be." "How much?" I asked. 9,800. I blinked. The number was so specific. It wasn't 10,000. It wasn't 5,000. It was 9,800. 9,000. I repeated, the shock momentarily overriding the anger. "Mom, that is almost all the savings I have left from the fellowship stipend. I have rent. I have to move closer to the city for the job. Why do you need almost 10 grand on a Monday morning?" "It's 9,800. Nor. And don't be dramatic. It's an emergency. Dad had a thing, a liability thing. We need to cover it by noon or there will be penalties." "Big penalties? What kind of liability?" "Just trust us, okay? We raised you. We paid for your braces. We put a roof over your head. Just wire it. I'll text you the routing number right now. You can do it from your phone." The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its monstrosity. They skipped my graduation for a party, ignoring me completely. And the very next contact is a demand for money, not an apology, an invoice. "I can't wire it," I said. "Why not? You have the app. You sent money for Aunt Sloane's gift last month." "No, I mean, I won't wire it blindly. If you need that kind of money, I need to understand why. I'll drive down to Dayton. I'll bring a check. We can talk. There's no time for that. Just send it." Her voice sharpened, the sweetness evaporating like steam. "Why do you always have to make everything so difficult? We are your parents. I'll be there in 2 hours. Mom, if it's an emergency, surely you'll be home and surely you want to see me." I hung up before she could argue. My hand was shaking as I lowered the phone, but it wasn't shaking from fear anymore. It was shaking from adrenaline. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a chaotic rhythm. I walked to the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim room. I didn't log into my bank account. I didn't check my email. Instead, I typed 3 words into the search bar: credit report, free annual. I needed to know why they needed exactly $9,800. I had a sinking feeling it wasn't a liability thing. It felt like a debt thing. And with my parents, debt was never just their problem. I entered my social security number. I answered the security questions. "What was the make of your first car? Which of these streets have you lived on?" The report generated a spinning wheel for a few seconds. Those seconds felt like hours. Then the page refreshed, populating the screen with a dense list of accounts and numbers. I scrolled past my student loans. I scrolled past my one credit card with a $500 limit that I used for gas. Then I stopped. Under the section labeled Recent Inquiries and New Accounts, there was a line item that made the blood drain from my face, leaving me cold all over again. Personal loan originated 12 days ago. Principal amount $14,500. Borrower Nora Cook. I stared at the screen. The room seemed to tilt. I had not taken out a loan. I had not signed any paperwork. I had not spoken to a loan officer. I whispered to the empty room, my voice trembling. I didn't sign this. Growing up in Dayton, Ohio, the calendar on our kitchen wall was not marked with birthdays or anniversaries. It was marked with kickoff times in the Cook household. Football was not just a sport. It was a gravitational force. It was the weather system that dictated the climate of our lives. If the local team won, we ate steak and the house was full of laughter that felt almost genuine if they lost, or worse, if the specific spread my father had bet on did not cover. The house descended into a heavy, silent grayness that lasted until Tuesday. My parents, Gavin and Mara, were not villains in the way you see in movies. They never raised a hand to me. They never locked me in a closet or starved me. To the neighbors, they were perfectly average, middle-class people who kept their lawn mowed and waved when they got the mail. But inside the walls of our split-level house, I learned very early on that I was competing for their attention against a multi-billion-dollar industry, and I was losing. They loved me, I suppose, in the distracted way a person loves a piece of furniture they have owned for a long time. They wanted me to be there, but they did not necessarily want to interact with me. I was a background character in the movie of their lives. While the main plot played out on the 15 screen in the living room, I became an expert at reading the room before I even knew how to multiply. I knew not to ask for help with homework during the fourth quarter. I knew that Sunday dinners were not for conversation, but for eating silently while the post-game commentary ran at full volume. I learned to be small. I learned to be quiet. I learned that if I wanted something done, I had to do it myself because asking them meant risking that glazed-over look in their eyes. The one that said, "Not now, Nora. The game is on." By the time I was 16, I had stopped asking. I got a job at a pretzel stand in the mall so I could buy my own school clothes. I filled out my own permission slips. When it came time for college applications, I sat at the kitchen table late at night, surrounded by tax forms I had dug out of the filing cabinet myself, figuring out the FAFSA while my parents slept. They did not know I was applying until the acceptance letter started coming in. When I showed them my acceptance to the state university with a partial scholarship, Mom looked up from her tablet where she was checking Fantasy League stats. She smiled, a quick fleeting thing, and said, "That is great, honey, really great." Then she immediately turned to Dad and asked if he thought the quarterback's knee injury was going to affect the spread for the Monday night game. That was the pattern, a flash of acknowledgement followed by the immediate pivot back to what really mattered to them. I spent my 20s trying to break that pattern. I thought if I just achieved enough, if I became successful enough, I could force them to look at me. I thought I could outshine the stadium lights. That was why I went to grad school. It was not just about the career. It was about proving that I was worth paying attention to. I wanted to escape the cycle of mediocrity and low-level, gambling debt that seemed to follow them like a cloud. I wanted a life where money was in the bank, not riding on a parlay card. When I landed the job at Wexler and Breyer Solutions, a corporate consulting firm in downtown Columbus, it felt like the finish line of a marathon I had been running alone for a decade. The starting salary was more money than my father had ever made in a single year. The benefits were comprehensive, but the thing that made my hands shake when I signed the offer letter was the signing bonus. It was substantial. It was enough to pay off the high-interest credit card I had used for textbooks and put a deposit on a real apartment in a safe neighborhood. It was my ticket out of the student housing slum I had been living in. I remember calling them to tell them about the job. This was 2 months before graduation. I drove home to Dayton to tell them in person because I wanted to see their faces. I wanted a celebration. We sat in the living room. The TV was on, muted but flickering. I got the job. I told them, senior analyst. It starts in January. Dad nodded, sipping his beer. Good benefits, he asked. Great benefits, I said, and a signing bonus. That was the moment their eyes actually focused on me. For the first time in years, the glaze vanished. They looked at me with a sharpness that felt almost predatory. A bonus? Mom asked, leaning forward like a cash bonus. Up front. Yes, I said, feeling a sudden cold prickle on the back of my neck. It is for relocation and getting settled. I did not tell them the amount. Something in my gut, a survival instinct honed over 29 years, told me to keep that number to myself. I just said it was helpful. They seemed happy. They toasted me with their beers for an hour. We felt like a normal family. We talked about my commute. We talked about the cost of living in Columbus. I drove back to my campus apartment feeling lighter than I had in years. I told myself that I was being cynical. I told myself that they were just clumsy with their love, that they did not know how to express pride without making it about money, but that deep down they were proud. I needed to believe that. I needed to believe it because graduation was coming up, and I wanted them there more than I wanted to admit. I went all out for this ceremony. I bought the deluxe regalia package, the one with the heavy high-quality fabric and the commemorative stole. I made reservations at a steakhouse downtown, a place with white tablecloths and waiters in vests. I sent them the menu links. I sent them the parking maps. I treated them like VIPs. "We will be there," Dad said, clapping a hand on my shoulder a few weeks before the date. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." "Kiddo, I put it in the calendar," Mom added, "right on the fridge." I believed them. I looked at that calendar, seeing my graduation date written in Mom's looping handwriting, and I let myself hope. I let myself imagine the photos we would take. I let myself imagine them bragging to their friends, not about a bet they won, but about their daughter, the Master of Science. Then came the week before the ceremony. It was a Tuesday evening. I was packing up my apartment, surrounded by cardboard boxes and bubble wrap. Mom called. We chatted about the weather, about the drive up. Then the tone shifted. The air on the line changed. "So, Nora," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "that bonus. Did it hit your account yet?" I paused, tape gun in hand. "Yeah, he did." "Oh, nothing," she said quickly. "Just curious. It must be nice to have a cushion." "How much was it again?" "You never said." "The exact number. It is enough to cover my move and my first month's rent." I said, deflecting. Right. But is it like 5,000, 10,000? Mom, why does it matter?" "It doesn't." She laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. "I am just excited for you. It is a lot of money, that's all. Just be careful with it. Don't spend it all in one place." I hung up, feeling uneasy. I tried to shake it off. I told myself she was just being nosy. Mom had always been obsessed with other people's money because she and Dad were so bad at managing their own. I told myself it was just curiosity, not calculation. But as I sat there on the floor of my half-packed apartment, a memory clawed its way up from the back of my mind. A memory I had buried deep because looking at it hurt too much. I was 17. It was the summer before my senior year of high school. I had been working at the pretzel stand for 2 years, picking up every extra shift I could. I was saving for a car, nothing fancy, just a used sedan so I could drive myself to community college classes during my senior year. I had saved $2,300. It was a fortune to me. I kept it in a savings account that was technically a custodial account, meaning my parents' names were on it too. I remembered the day I went to the bank to withdraw the money. I had found a car, a beige Toyota with a dented bumper. The seller was waiting. I handed my slip to the teller. She typed into her computer, frowned, and then typed again. "I am sorry, honey," she said, sliding the slip back to me. "There is only $12 in this account." I remember the sound of the blood rushing in my ears. I remember thinking it was a mistake, a computer glitch. I ran home. I found my parents in the kitchen. They were looking at a brochure for a timeshare in Florida. "Where is my money?" I demanded, my voice shaking. They did not even look surprised. They exchanged a look, that same conspiratorial look, and then Dad sighed. "We had to borrow it. Nora," he said as calmly as if he were telling me he had borrowed a cup of sugar. "We got behind on a few things. The mortgage, the credit cards. We didn't want to worry you, but that was for my car." I cried. "I worked for 2 years for that. We will pay you back," Mom said, reaching out to touch my arm. "As soon as Dad's end-of-year check comes in, we promise it is just a loan. Family helps family, right?" They never paid me back. Not a dime. The offer check came and went, spent on a new flat-screen TV and a weekend trip to a casino in Indiana. When I brought it up, they called me selfish. They told me I didn't understand how hard it was to run a household. They made me feel guilty for asking for my own money. I eventually bought a car, but it took me another year of working double shifts. I learned to open a bank account they could not touch the day I turned 18. I sat in my apartment 12 years later staring at the phone. That memory of the empty bank account and the beige Toyota pulsed in my brain like a warning light. Family helps family. That was their mantra. But in our house, the help only ever flowed in one direction. I shook my head physically, trying to dislodge the memory. This is different. I told myself, I am an adult now. They are coming to my graduation. They are proud of me. They aren't going to steal from me. I was so desperate to believe that the two empty chairs in section 104 were just a traffic accident. I was so desperate to believe that the text message about the Super Bowl was just a momentary lapse in judgment. But as I looked at that credit report on my laptop screen, seeing the number $14,500 staring back at me, I realized that the 17-year-old girl in the bank lobby had been right all along. The pattern hadn't broken. It had just escalated. They hadn't just borrowed my savings this time. They had borrowed my identity. And just like that day in the kitchen when I was a teenager, I knew they had absolutely no intention of paying it back. The realization was a cold, heavy stone in my stomach. I wasn't their daughter. I was their safety net. I was their bank. And they had just made a very large withdrawal. I sat in the front seat of my Honda Civic in the parking lot of the Schottenstein Center, the engine idling just to keep the heater running. The ceremony was over. The crowd was dispersing, a sea of black robes and colorful bouquets moving toward cars. My phone felt heavy in my hand like a stone I was afraid to throw. I had read Dad's message stuck at work thing watching live stream a dozen times. The pixels hadn't changed, but my interpretation of them was shifting from confusion to a cold, hard skepticism. My father's job at the distribution center was unionized, strict hours. Sunday shifts were voluntary and paid double time, and he had complained for years about how he never took them because he valued his leisure time. I typed a reply, my fingers numb, not from the cold, but from the shock. Where are you exactly? I'm still at the arena. If you're at work, I can drive by and bring you a program. I watched the three little bubbles appear, then disappear. He was typing, then stopping, then typing again. Finally, the response came through. It was not a location. It was a command. Don't make a big deal out of this. Nora, go celebrate with your friends. Don't make a big deal. The phrase was their favorite shield. It was the Teflon coating they used to deflect any accountability. If I was upset, they forgot my birthday. I was making a big deal. If I was hurt, they spent my tuition money on a vacation. I was being dramatic. I was staring at the screen, debating whether to call when a notification from Megan popped up. It was a direct message on Instagram. No text, just a screenshot of a story she had seen. My stomach dropped. I opened the image. It was crisp and high resolution, likely taken with a new iPhone. It showed my parents standing in front of a massive vinyl backdrop. The backdrop was printed with logos of beer brands and the bold block letters, Super Bowl Sunday, VIP tailgate party. They weren't at work. They weren't in traffic. They were standing on artificial turf under a tent. Dad was wearing his lucky jersey, the one he claimed he hadn't washed since 2004. Mom was wearing a matching scarf and holding a novelty foam finger. They were smiling, not the polite, tight-lipped smiles they used in family Christmas cards, but genuine wide-mouthed grins. They looked like they had just won the lottery. The caption added by my Aunt read, "The crew has arrived and let the games begin." I felt a physical wave of Norser. It wasn't just that they had skipped my graduation. It was the lie, the lazy, insulting lie. They had told me they were watching the live stream, but in the photo, there wasn't a phone or tablet in sight. There was only beer, noise, and the anticipatory joy of a football game. I tried to video call Mom. I needed to see their faces. I needed them to look at me and say the lie out loud. The phone rang and rang and rang. Then the screen went black. Call declined. A second later, a text from Mom appeared. Kind torque. Too loud here. Machines are running. Call you later. Machines. She was calling the DJ speakers and the roar of the pregame crowd. Machines. She thought I was stupid. She truly believed that if she just typed the words, I would accept them as reality, because for 29 years, that is exactly what I had done. I had swallowed their alternate reality to keep the peace, but the peace was gone. I put the car in gear. I had a reservation at the refectory at 1:00 in the afternoon. It was a French restaurant, the kind of place my parents would never go to on their own, but I had booked it because I wanted to treat them. I wanted to show them the world I was entering. I could have gone home. I could have gone to Megan's family lunch, but a strange masochistic stubbornness took hold of me. I had made a plan. I had earned this celebration. If I went home and cried in my pillow, they won. If I canceled the reservation, I was erasing my own achievement. So I drove to the restaurant. I walked in, still wearing my dress under my coat, carrying my diploma cover. A hostess smiled warmly. Welcome. Checking in for cook. Party of 3. Party of 1, I said. My voice was steady, surprising even me. My parents got stuck. The hostess's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of pity that cut deeper than any insult before she recovered her professional mask. Of course, right this way. She led me to the table I had requested. It was by the window, bathed in the gray winter light. It was set for 3. 3 crystal water goblets, 3 folded napkins, 3 sets of heavy silverware. I sat down. You can take the other settings away, I said. The busboy hurried over, clearing the plates and glasses with a quiet efficiency that felt like he was cleaning up a crime scene. I sat there alone in the middle of a bustling dining room. To my left, a large family was toasting with champagne. The graduate, a girl with bright red hair, was beaming as her father gave a speech. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the way he looked at her. He looked at her like she was the only thing in the room. To my right, an older couple was holding hands across the table. I ordered the duck breast and a glass of pain noir. I ate slowly. I forced myself to taste the food, to appreciate the texture of the sauce, the crunch of the vegetables. I sat with my back straight. I smiled at the waiter when he refilled my water. I performed the role of a woman who was perfectly fine with eating alone on her graduation day. But inside, I was screaming. I was replaying the photo of them at the tailgate party over and over in my head. They had traded this quiet, dignified moment of family pride for a foam finger in a keg sand. I finished my meal. I paid the bill, tipping 25%, because the staff had been kind enough not to ask questions. I drove home in silence. The afternoon stretched out, long and empty. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't want to see the game. I didn't want to see the spectacle that had stolen my parents. It was 9:00 at night when my phone finally rang. It was Mom. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. I didn't say hello. "We saw you called," Mom said. Her voice was slurred just slightly. The edges of her words were soft, fuzzy with alcohol. It was crazy today. Just crazy. "I saw the pictures," I said. There was a pause on the other end, a beat of silence where a normal person would feel shame. "Oh," she said. "Well, your aunt posts everything. You know her. You said you were at work." I said, "You said you were watching the live stream." "We did. We watched parts of it." She lied. I could hear the lie in the pitch of her voice. "But listen, Nora, don't start with the attitude. It was the Super Bowl. Do you know how hard it is to get into that tailgate? Dad's friend came through with passes at the last minute. We couldn't say no." "You couldn't say no to a party," I said. "But you could say no to my graduation." "Nora, stop it." She snapped. The alcohol made her aggressive. "You are being incredibly selfish. The Super Bowl is once a year. It's a huge event. Your father has been talking about this season for months." "My master's degree is once a lifetime," I said. "I won't graduate again." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You graduated high school. You graduated college. Now this. Graduations happen every year. They are just ceremonies. You walk, you get a paper, you go home. It's not like the game. Anything could happen in the game. The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Graduations happen every year. In her mind, my achievement was a renewable resource. It was common. It was repetitive. A football game, a spectacle of strangers chasing a ball. That was rare. That was precious. That was worth abandoning her daughter for. I sat alone at the restaurant. I said quietly, "I had to tell the waiter to take your plates away." "Well, that was your choice," she said dismissively. "You could have come down here. We told you to come watch the game with us after you were done. I asked you where you were and Dad told me not to make a big deal out of it because you are. You are making a huge deal out of nothing. We are happy for you. Nor congratulations. There is that what you want. A medal." I closed my eyes. There was no point. You cannot shame people who have no capacity for it. "I am tired. Mom," I said, "I am going to sleep." "Wait," she said. Her tone shifted instantly. The aggression evaporated, replaced by that saccharine, wheedling tone I hated. "Before you go about tomorrow, I really need you to handle that transfer first thing in the morning. The 9,800, I said. "Yes, it is urgent. We can't have late fees. It's for well, just send it." "What is it for, Mom?" I asked. "If it is that urgent, tell me what it is." "Don't ask too many questions," she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Just help your family. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. It's your turn." She hung up. I sat in the dark of my apartment, the silence ringing in my ears. Don't ask too many questions. I opened my laptop again. The glow of the screen was the only light in the room. I had already seen the existence of the loan in my previous search, but I hadn't looked at the details. I hadn't looked at the timeline. I logged back into the credit monitoring site. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. I was operating on cold clinical precision. I clicked on the entry. Personal loan, $14,500. I expanded the details. I looked at the origination date, January 24th. I did the mental math. January 24th was exactly 12 days ago. It was the Tuesday before the conference championships. It was the week everyone started planning their Super Bowl parties. My parents didn't have $14,000. They never had that kind of money, but they had thrown a party that looked like it cost a fortune. The VIP passes, the catering, the endless alcohol, the new jerseys. They hadn't just skipped my graduation to go to a party. They had financed the party using my name. I looked at the lender's name. It was a predatory online bank, the kind that approves loans in minutes with high interest rates if you have a decent credit score. My score was 780. Theirs was likely in the 500s. They had used my social security number. They had used my good standing, the financial reputation I had built by eating ramen and working double shifts to buy beer and phone fingers for their friends. I whispered to the empty room, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. "I never borrowed that." The realization settled over me, not with sadness, but with a terrifying clarity. They didn't love me. You don't steal $14,000 from someone you love. You don't steal their future to pay for a Sunday afternoon. I wasn't their daughter. I was their credit mule. I closed the laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the blank screen. And for the first time in my life, I stopped wishing they were different. I stopped wishing they would show up. I started planning. If they wanted to play games, we would play. But I wasn't going to play by their rules anymore. I was going to play by the rules of the state of Ohio and the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And unlike the Super Bowl, there would be no overtime. Monday morning arrived with a stillness that felt artificial, like the quiet before a tornado touches down. I sat at my kitchen table, a mug of black coffee untouched and cooling beside my laptop. The credit report was still open on the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. But I was done staring. I was ready to verify. I picked up my phone and dialed the customer service number listed next to the loan entry on the report. It was a direct line to a lender called Quick Bridge Capital, a name that sounded designed to prey on people who needed money fast and did not care about the fine print. The automated system made me jump through hoops asking for my social security number and date of birth. My fingers felt stiff as I punched them in. Finally, a human voice came on the line. "Thank you for calling Quick Bridge. This is Jason." How can I help you today? Hi, Jason, I said, my voice sounding disturbingly calm. I am calling to inquire about the details of a personal loan under the name Nora Cook. I need to check the contact information on file. One moment, MS. Cook, I see the account here. Originated January 24th. Principal amount of $14,500. To verify your identity, can you confirm the secondary phone number listed on the account? I hesitated. I had never listed a secondary number on anything in my life. I was a single woman living alone. My cell phone was my only line. I am actually calling to update that. I lied smoothly. Can you read me the last 4 digits of the number you have? I want to make sure it is the old landline. Sure, Jason said, oblivious to the trap. The secondary number ends in 4522. My breath hitched. 4522. It was not a landline. It was my mother's cell phone number, the same number that had texted me yesterday, saying it was too loud to talk. Right, I said, writing the number down on a notepad. Pressing the pen so hard, the tip tore through the paper. And just for my records, was there a verification call made when this loan was opened? Yes, ma'am, Jason replied cheerfully. We spoke with you on January 25th at 10:00 in the morning. You verified the income source and answered the security questions successfully. I see, I said. The room felt suddenly freezing. And what questions did I answer? Standard security protocol, maternal grandmother's maiden name, and the make and model of your first vehicle. I thanked him and hung up. I sat there, the silence ringing in my ears, maternal grandmother's maiden name, my nana, the woman who had left me that small inheritance. My parents had borrowed years ago. Make and model of your first vehicle, the beige Toyota, the car I had worked double shifts at the pretzel stand to buy after they stole my savings. These weren't just facts. They were specific, painful tucked in with them. They used the very memories of their previous financial abuse to facilitate a new theft. A stranger stealing my identity would have had to hack the database to find that information. My parents just had to remember the car they refused to help me pay for. But how did they get the approval emails? Loan applications send confirmations. They send contracts to sign. I checked my inbox every day. I had seen nothing. I turned back to my laptop. I logged into my email account, the one I had used since high school. It was a standard Gmail address. I clicked on the gear icon and went into settings, then filters and blocked addresses. My hands were trembling now. I scrolled down the list. I'd expected to find nothing. I prayed to find nothing. But there it was. A filter created on January 23rd. Matches from credit or loan or bank or DocuWine. Do this skip in Ox. Mark has read. Forward to the Cook's family. Yeah, calm. I stared at the rule. It was so simple, so clean, so malicious. They hadn't just guessed my password. They must have known it for years. Maybe I had logged in on their computer during a holiday visit and forgotten to uncheck remember this device. Maybe they had used the forgot password feature and answered the security questions they knew the answers to. However they did it, they had been sitting inside my digital life, quietly diverting any warning signs into their own inbox, scrubbing the crime clean before I could even see it. I felt violated in a way that had nothing to do with money. This was like finding out someone had been watching me sleep. They had curated my reality, editing out the parts where they were robbing me. I opened a new tab and logged into my university portal. I needed to see how deep the rut went. I clicked on personal information under emergency contact. The name had been changed. It used to be Megan. Now, it read Mara Cook and the phone number listed was Mom's cell. It was the Google Voice number for the Victory Sunday Sports Lounge project I had seen on the credit report details. They had updated my contact info not to be helpful, but to ensure that if the university or any alumni association called, the call would go to their business line. They were intercepting me. A memory flashed in my mind, vivid and sharp. I was 18, packing up my room to move into the dorms. I had a plastic accordion folder with my birth certificate, my social security card, and my passport. Mom had come into the room, laundry basket in hand. She looked soft, maternal. You don't want to take those to the dorms. Morer, she had said, her voice dripping with concern. Roommates are nosy. Things get stolen. Why don't you leave the official papers here? I'll put them in the fireproof box with ours just to keep them safe and organized. I had hesitated, but she was my mother and she was offering to protect me. So I handed her the folder. I handed her my identity. Safe and organized. The irony made me want to scream. She hadn't been protecting me from thieves. She was banking the tools she would need to become the thief. My phone rang, shattering the memory. The screen lit up with Dad. I stared at it. The vibration buzzed against the wood of the table. I took a deep breath, forcing my heart rate to slow down. I needed to be smart. I couldn't scream. I couldn't accuse. Not yet. I answered. "Hello, Nora." Dad's voice was tight, high-pitched. He sounded out of breath. "Did you go to the bank? Did you send the transfer?" "I am working on it, Dad," I said, keeping my voice flat. "But the bank is asking questions. It is a large amount for a mobile transfer." "Well, tell them it is an emergency," he snapped. "We don't have time for red tape. We are going to get hit with penalties if that money isn't in the account by 200. "Penalties for what?" I asked innocently. "Mom said it was a liability thing." "You are saying penalties. Is this a tax issue?" "No, I mean yes, sort of." He stammered. "It is just late fees, administrative costs. You know how these bureaucrats are. They bleed you dry if you miss a deadline by an hour." "Late fees on what, Dad?" I pressed. "Just a little harder on the house stuff. The maintenance fees. Just send the money." "Nora, stop interrogating me like I'm a criminal." The defense of anger in his voice was the final confirmation. He wasn't scared of the IRS. He was scared of a vendor. He was scared of the caterer for the Super Bowl party, or the rental company for the big screen TV, or the landlord for the sports lounge. I knew I had to act. If I said no now, they would run. They would hang up, dodge my calls, and I would be left with $14,000 debt and no confession. I needed them in a room. I needed ink on paper. "Okay," I said, letting my voice soften. "I want to help. I really do. I don't want you guys to be in trouble." I heard him exhale, a long, ragged sound of relief. "Thank you, honey. I knew we could count on you. You are a good girl. But," I added, "I can't just wire it. My bank won't release that much cash without a signed gift letter or a loan agreement. It is federal regulations for amounts over 10,000. That was a lie. But Dad didn't know banking regulations. He only knew desperation. "A letter?" he asked. "What kind of letter?" "Just a simple paper saying I'm lending you the money and you agree to pay it back eventually. It stops the IRS from taxing it as income for you. I can type it up, but I need to bring it to you to sign. I can drive down this afternoon." There was a muffled conversation on the other end. He was checking with Mom. "Fine," he said, coming back on the line. "But you have to bring the check with you. A cashier's check payable to me." "I will," I promised. "I'll meet you at the diner off exit 44, the one near the highway. It is halfway." "Okay, 300. Don't be late." "I won't." As soon as he hung up, I dialed a number I had found during my research the night before. Elliot Vaughan, attorney at law. He was a civil litigation lawyer who specialized in family financial disputes. His office was not in a glass skyscraper. It was in a strip mall next to a dentist. But the review said he was a pit bull. "Mr. Vaughan can see you in 30 minutes if you can get here." His receptionist said, "I am on my way." I grabbed my laptop, the printed credit report, and the screenshots of the email filters. Elliot Vaughan was a man in his 50s with a messy desk and eyes that looked like they had seen every possible way human beings could disappoint each other. He listened without interrupting as I laid out the timeline. I showed him the loan origination date. I showed him the party photos. I showed him the email forwarding rule. "And you are sure you never authorized this?" he asked, looking at the credit report. "I didn't even know about it until yesterday." I said, "They skipped my graduation to throw a party funded by this loan." Van leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his chin. He picked up the credit report again. "You verified the phone number?" "Yes, it is my mother's and the security questions. They used personal family history." He nodded slowly. Then he looked me in the eye. His expression wasn't pitying. It was grave. "Nora," he said, his voice low and serious, I need you to understand what we are looking at here. You keep calling this a family loan or a dispute. You are trying to frame this as a civil disagreement, isn't it? I asked. They are my parents. They just overstepped. No, Vaughn said firmly. Overstepping is reading your diary. Overstepping is showing up unannounced. This, he gestured to the stack of papers. This is a felony. I felt the blood drain from my face. This isn't borrowing, Van continued, his words landing like hammer strikes. Borrowing implies consent. Borrowing implies an intent to repay based on an agreement. When someone uses your social security number, falsifies your contact information, intercepts your mail and impersonates you to a financial institution to obtain funds, that is not a family matter. That is identity theft. That is wire fraud. He leaned forward. If we proceed with this, Nora, we aren't just suing them for money. We are accusing them of a crime. And if you want to clear your name and get this debt off your record, you cannot half-measure this. You cannot protect them and protect yourself at the same time. I sat in the chair, the leather creaking beneath me. I thought about the emptied seats at the arena. I thought about the machines or loud text. I thought about the email filter diverting my financial warnings while they drank beer and cheered. I understand, I said. My voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. Good, Van said. First step, we freeze everything right now. Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. We lock it down so tight they can't even open a library card in your name. Then you go to that meeting, but you don't give them a check. What do I give them? You give them a rope, Van said grimly, and you let them tie the knot themselves. He slid a document across the desk. It wasn't a loan agreement. It was an acknowledgement of debt and financial responsibility. If they sign this, Vaughan said, they are admitting the debt exists and that they are the beneficiaries of the funds. It won't keep them out of jail if the bank presses charges, but it will prove that you were the victim, not the co-conspirator. Get them to sign it. I took the paper. It felt light in my hand, but I knew it carried the weight of my entire relationship with my parents. I will get them to sign, I said. I walked out of his office and into the cold Ohio afternoon. I pulled out my phone and opened the credit bureau apps one by one. I toggled the switch that said freeze credit. Click, click, click. It was done. The bank was closed. The endless line of credit they thought they had birthed and raised was officially cut off. I got into my car and started the drive toward exit 44. I wasn't the daughter driving home anymore. I was the investigator driving to a crime scene, and the suspects were waiting for me, thinking I was bringing them a payday when I was actually bringing them an indictment. The Midway Diner sat just off exit 44 of the interstate, a squat building wrapped in chrome and neon that had seen better decades. I chose it for three specific reasons. First, it was geographically neutral, exactly halfway between my apartment in Columbus and their house in Dayton, which meant they could not complain about the drive. Second, it was right next to the on-ramp, giving them the psychological comfort of a quick getaway. And third, unlike the cozy, dim restaurants my mother usually preferred for family talks, the Midway was brightly lit and had a high-definition security camera positioned directly above the register with a wide-angle view of booth number 4. I arrived 15 minutes early. I requested booth number 4. I ordered a black coffee and sat with my back to the wall facing the entrance. I placed a manila folder on the Formica table. Inside was the document Elliot Vaughan had drafted. It was not thick, just 2 pages, but it was dense with legal weight. When my parents walked in, the bell above the door jingled cheerfully, a sound that felt jarring against the knot of tension in my stomach. They looked like people who were trying very hard to appear normal, but were vibrating with anxiety. Dad was wearing a polo shirt that was slightly wrinkled, and he kept touching his back pocket as if checking for his wallet. Mom had put on lipstick, a bright coral shade that bled slightly into the fine lines around her mouth, but her eyes were darting around the room like a trapped bird. They spotted me and hurried over. There were no hugs. The air around us was too charged for physical contact. They slid into the booth opposite me, bringing with them the faint, stale smell of cigarette smoke and car air freshener. Nor, Mom said, breathless. She reached across the table to pat my hand, but I moved it to wrap around my coffee mug. Her hand landed on the cold table. You made good time. I left work early, I said. It was a lie. I had taken a personal day to dismantle my family's financial hold on me. You guys look tired. It has been a stressful week. Dad grunted. He picked up the laminated menu and stared at it without reading. Very stressful. You know how it is. Unexpected expenses, right? I said the liability thing. Exactly. Mom jumped in, her voice pitching up. It is just one of those things. But we are so glad you are helping. We really are. We were talking in the car about how proud we are of you. You know that, right? We raised you to be successful. We knew you would step up when the family needed you. The guilt trip arrived right on schedule. It was their opening gambit always. We raised you as if feeding and clothing a child was a transaction that echoed interest payable, on demand, 3 decades later. I am happy to help clear things up, I said evenly. I did not say I am happy to pay. I chose my words with the precision of a surgeon. So, Dad said, dropping the menu. He leaned in, lowering his voice. Did you bring the check? The cashier's check. I have the transfer set up on my phone, I said, tapping the screen of my mobile lying next to the folder. It is faster than a check. It clears instantly. Dad's eyes locked onto the phone. I saw a flash of hunger in them, not for food, but for relief. He looked like a man standing on a burning deck, seeing a helicopter. That is great, he said. That is perfect. Do it now so we can get on the road. The bank closes at 5. I said. But first, we need to sign the agreement I mentioned. I opened the manila folder and slid the 2 pages across the table. I also placed a heavy black pen on top of them. What is this? Dad asked, looking at the paper with suspicion. It is just a family support agreement, I explained, keeping my tone casual, almost bored, like I told you on the phone because the amount is $9,800. It is close to the federal reporting limit. My accountant said I need a paper trail so the IRS does not think I am hiding income or paying you under the table for services. It just states that I am providing these funds to you to cover your outstanding debts and that you acknowledge receipt. Mom laughed, a nervous tinkling sound. Oh, Nora, you are so corporate now. Your accountant. You are 29. Since when do you have an accountant? Since I started making enough money to be taxed on it, I said, it is just standard stuff. Mom, it protects both of us. It proves this is not income for you, so you won't get taxed on it either. That was the bait. The fear of taxes. Dad didn't even read the first paragraph. He heard won't get taxed and saw the promise of money waiting on my phone. He grabbed the pen. Fine, fine, he muttered. Where do I sign? Bottom of the 2nd page, I said, and initial the bottom of the 1st. He scribbled his signature aggressively, the paper crinkling under the force of his hand. He didn't notice the clause in paragraph 3 that stated the signatories acknowledged they were the sole beneficiaries of the funds and accepted full liability for the underlying debts. He didn't notice that by signing this he was creating a paper trail that linked him directly to the need for the money. Money that matched the exact amount of the fraudulent loan payments. He slid the paper to Mom. Sign it, Mara. Let's go. Mom hesitated for a second, her eyes scanning the top of the page. Acknowledgement of financial responsibility. She read aloud. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. This sounds so serious, Nora. It is money. Mom, I said. Money is serious. You want the transfer, right? She looked at Dad, then at my phone. The greed went out. She signed her name with a flourish right next to his. There, she said, pushing the papers back to me. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You and your paperwork. You would think you were merging a company, not helping your parents. I took the papers and slid them back into the folder. I felt a click in my chest, like a lock snapping shut. I had them. They had just admitted in writing that they needed this money to cover their debts. I will authorize the transfer as soon as I get home and scan this to my file. I said what? Dad's face turned red. You said you would do it now. I said I had it set up. I corrected. I need to upload the document first. It is a compliance thing. The app won't release the funds without the attachment. It was nonsense. Technical gibberish, but they were digital immigrants who struggled to attach a PDF to an email. They had no idea if I was lying. "Nora, come on," Dad groaned. "We need to pay this today." "It will get there today," I assured him. "It is instant. Remember, I just need to get to my scanner." I took a sip of my coffee. It was bitter and lukewarm. I watched them over the rim of the mug. "So," I said, changing the subject, "how was the party, the Super Bowl?" The air at the table instantly froze. Mom stiffened, her spine hitting the back of the booth. "I told you," she said, her voice sharp. "It was fine. Why do you keep bringing that up?" "I am just curious," I said. $9,800 is a lot of money. I was wondering if the party had anything to do with it. You know, since the loan you opened in my name was for $14,000 and you probably spent about $4,000 on the event itself." I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I said it with the same casual inflection I would use to ask if they wanted dessert. Silence slammed into the table. Dad's mouth opened, then closed. Mom's face went pale, the rouge standing out like clown makeup. "What are you talking about?" Dad stammered. "Loan. We didn't open a loan." "Don't," I said. I held up a hand. "Please don't insult my intelligence." I saw the credit report. I spoke to Quick Bridge Capital. I know about the verification call. I know about the email filters. Mom looked away, staring out the window at the highway traffic. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "We were going to pay it back," she whispered. It was an admission finally. "With what?" I asked. "With the money I'm supposed to send you right now. You're asking me to give you cash to pay the first installment of a loan you stole from me." "It is not stealing," Dad snapped, slamming his hand on the table. A few people in the diner turned to look. He lowered his voice, hissing across the table. "It is leverage. We needed capital. We had a sure thing. We just needed a bridge loan to get it off the ground. We were going to pay it all off before the first statement even came to your house." "But I graduated," I said, "and the statement didn't come to my house. It went to your email because you diverted it. We were protecting you from the stress." Mom cried. "We didn't want you to worry while you were finishing your exams. We were doing it for you." "For me?" I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You skipped my graduation to party on my credit." "How is that for me?" "It wasn't a party." Dad said it was a networking event. "It was business. You don't understand how the real world works, Nora. You sit in your ivory tower with your salary, but out here you have to hustle. You have to spend money to make money." "Okay," I said. I leaned forward. "If it is business, show me the plan. Show me the books." "But if I am the investor," I said, "and apparently I am. Since my credit score is funding this operation, then I have the right to see the accounts. I want to see every debt you currently have. I want to see the mortgage status. I want to see the credit card statements. Open the books. You have no right to check our finances." Dad spat. He looked insulted, his pride wounded. "We are your parents. You don't audit your parents." "And I don't pay them either," I said. I sat back. "That is the deal. You want my help. I need total transparency. If you are hiding things, I can't help you. And if I can't help you, I certainly won't transfer $10,000 to a black hole." Dad stared at me with pure venom. He looked like he wanted to reach across the table and shake me, but he couldn't. The camera was above us, and the checkbook was in my pocket. "You have changed," Mom said, shaking her head. She looked at me like I was a stranger. "You used to be so sweet, so giving. Now you are just cold." "I am not cold, Mom," I said. "I am just tired of being kindling for your fires." Dad stood up abruptly. He grabbed his jacket. "Let's go, Mara. She is not going to give it to us. She is just playing games. She wants to humiliate us." "I am not playing games," I said calmly. "I am asking for accountability. If you send me the full list of debts by tonight, I will consider the transfer." "Forget it," Dad said. "We will figure it out ourselves like we always do." He threw a crumpled $5 bill on the table for the coffee they hadn't ordered. "Keep your money, Nora, and keep your judgment." Mom slid out of the booth. She paused, looking down at me. For a second, I thought she might apologize. "You will regret this," she said softly. "Family is all you have." When you push us away, you will have nobody. I have myself, I said, and that is the one person I haven't been taking care of. She turned and followed Dad out the door. The bell jingled again. I watched them through the window as they walked to their car, arguing before they even got the doors open. Dad was gesturing wildly. Mom was crying. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. I felt the immense relief of someone who has finally put down a heavy rucksack after a 10-mile hike. I picked up the folder with their signatures. They had signed the acknowledgement. They had admitted the debt was theirs. I had the recording of the conversation on my phone in my pocket. Ohio is a one-party consent state. Another detail Elliot Vaughan had reminded me of. My phone buzzed on the table. I picked it up, expecting a nasty text from Dad. It was from Elliot Vaughan. "Nor are you still with them? Don't sign anything else." I typed back. "They just left. I got the signatures on the support agreement." The typing bubbles appeared for a long time. Then the message came through. My paralegal was digging deeper into public filings based on the business name you saw on the Google Voice account. We found another document, a commercial lease agreement filed in Franklin County. I frowned. A lease for what? For a retail space in a strip mall in Dayton. Then replied, "Commercial real estate. But more, it is not just a lease. It is a 3-year contract with a personal guarantee." My heart stopped. A personal guarantee meant that if the business failed, the guarantor was personally liable for the entire rent of the 3-year term. "Who is the guarantor?" I typed, though I already knew the answer. Van sent a picture. It was a PDF screenshot of a signature page. "The guarantor is Nora Cook, but the signature doesn't match the one on your driver's license. It looks like your mother's handwriting trying to look like yours." I stared at the image. The project name was at the top of the page. Victory Sunday Sports Lounge. They hadn't just taken a loan to throw a party. The party was the launch event. They were opening a sports bar, and they had leased the building using my name as the safety net. If the bar went under, and with my parents, it definitely would. I wouldn't just be out $14,000. I would be on the hook for 3 years of commercial rent. That was hundreds of thousands of dollars. They were trying to borrow from me. They were trying to bankrupt me to fund their midlife crisis. I looked out the window. Their car was gone. They were racing back to Dayton, probably thinking they could hustle up the money from a loan shark or sell something to cover the immediate fees. They had no idea that I knew about the lounge. I picked up the folder. My hand was shaking again, but this time it wasn't adrenaline. It was rage. Pure white-hot rage. "Check, please," I called out to the waitress. I had to get to Columbus. I had to get to the lawyer. And then I had to shut down Victory Sundays before it even opened its doors. I drove back to Columbus with the gas pedal pressed against the floor mat, my speedometer hovering around 85, risking a ticket I didn't care about. The diner was in my rear view mirror, but the nausea from that meeting was riding shotgun. When I burst back into Elliot Vaughan's office, he didn't even look up from his desk. He just pointed to a chair. His desk, previously messy, was now covered in a specific, terrifying order. There were stacks of paper arranged like a map of a battlefield. "We found the rest," he said, his voice flat. "It is worse than the loan, nor the loan was just the down payment." He spun his monitor around. On the screen was a digital copy of a commercial lease agreement. The header read, "Victory Sunday Sports Lounge." "They didn't just rent a storefront," Van said, tapping the screen with a pen. "They leased a 3,000-t former steakhouse in a strip mall near the University District in Dayton. 3-year term, $12,000 a month plus triple net expenses, property taxes, insurance, maintenance." My eyes scanned the document. It was a dense wall of legalese, but the signatures at the bottom were clear. Gavin Cook, Mara Cook, and below them under the section titled Personal Guarantor was a signature that looked frighteningly like mine. "A personal guarantee," I whispered. The room felt like it was spinning. "Do they know what that means?" "They don't care what it means," Van said. "But you should. It means if the business fails, and let's be honest, 80% of restaurants fail in the first year, the landlord doesn't just evict them. He comes after the guarantor for the full value of the remaining lease. If they fold in month 2, You are on the hook for over $400,000. I sat down hard. $400,000. That wasn't debt. That was a life sentence. That was bankruptcy before I even cashed my first paycheck. And it's not just the rent, Van continued, mercilessly peeling back the layers. We found inquiries from a restaurant supply company, industrial fryers, 12 tap keg systems, 1080 televisions, all on lease to own contracts, all pending final credit approval based on your profile. He pulled out a glossy flyer that had been attached to the lease application. It was a mock-up of the vision for the bar. It showed a generic sports bar interior, but the marketing copy made my stomach churn. Victory Sundays, where every game is a home game, family-owned and operated. And there, in the bullet points of why we will succeed, was a line that made me want to vomit. Backed by local financial stability and strong community ties. Proud parents of a master's graduate. They had actually written that. They intended to hang a sign. They were going to use my degree, the very achievement they had ignored, as a marketing prop to sell buffalo wings and cheap beer. I need to call the broker, I said, my voice trembling with rage. I need to know how they sold this. Then nodded and dialed the number on the lease application. He put it on speaker. This is Mike, a voice boomed. He sounded like a car salesman, loud, friendly, and fast. Hi, Mike. This is legal counsel for Nora Cook regarding the lease on the Victory property. Bond said, oh, hey, great to hear from you, Mike chirped. We are all set on our end. Just waiting for that initial wire for the deposit. Your parents are great folks, by the way. Gavin has got some big ideas. He was telling me all about the Super Bowl party. I froze. The party? I asked, leaning toward the phone. Yeah, the big networking bash. Mike said, he told me that is why they couldn't make the graduation ceremony. He said, Mike, you have to spend money to make money. Said they invited 50 potential investors and VIP clients to the tailgate to build hype for the opening. Smart move. You got to build the brand right. The phone sat on the desk between us like a bomb. The Super Bowl party wasn't just a party. It was a launch event. They skipped my graduation not because they were lazy, but because they were working. They were working on spending my money. They were hustling neighbors and friends, acting like big shots, using the successful daughter narrative to legitimize a bar they couldn't afford. Mike, I said, my voice cutting through his cheerfulness like a razor. Did my parents mention that I would be funding this? Oh, absolutely, Mike laughed. Gavin couldn't stop bragging. Said, you just landed a massive contract in Columbus. Said you were the silent partner, the bank behind the operation. He said, my girl made it, so we all made it. It's really touching. Honestly, you don't see families stick together like that anymore. I signaled Fawn to cut the call. He hung up. My girl made it, so we all made it, I repeated. The words tasted like ash. I didn't wait. I picked up my phone and dialed Mom. I didn't care that they were driving. I didn't care if they were on the highway. She answered on the first ring. Nora, did you send it? We are almost home. I spoke to the broker. I said, I saw the lease for Victory Sundays. Silence. Absolute terrified silence. Then the sound of a sob. It was supposed to be a surprise. Mom wailed. The tears came instantly. A weaponized burst of emotion. We wanted to surprise you. We were going to cut the ribbon and show you that we aren't just losers. We wanted to build something for the family. You forged my signature on a 3-year commercial lease. I said, that isn't a surprise. Mom, that is a felony. We did it for us, she screamed, dropping the pretense. For the family. Do you have any idea how hard it is for your father watching everyone else get rich? He has a vision, Nora. He knows sports. This bar is a gold mine. We just needed a start. So you stole my identity to get it. We didn't steal. Dad's voice roared from the background. He must have snatched the phone. We borrowed. We are your parents. We fed you. We clothed you. We drove you to practice. You owe us. I owe you respect. I yelled back, my composure finally cracking. I don't owe you $400,000 in commercial rent. You are selfish, Dad shouted. You think you are better than us because you have that piece of paper. What is the point of you doing well if you don't save us? What is the point of your money if we're still struggling? You are supposed to be our retirement, Nora. That is how it works." The line went dead. I stared at the phone. You are supposed to be our retirement. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about family helps family. It was an investment strategy. They had invested in me food, clothes, shelter, and now they were liquidating the asset. I wasn't their child. I was a 401k that had finally matured. I was a walking, breathing credit limit. I looked at Vaughan. "They think they own me." "They don't," Van said. "Not if we act right now." "But, Nora, once I send these letters, there is no going back. You aren't just stopping a business deal. You are nuking a relationship. You are accusing them of fraud to third parties. The police might get involved." "Do it," I said. Van nodded and turned to his keyboard. "We need to send notices of fraud and unauthorized signature to the landlord, the leasing agent, the equipment supplier, and the bank. We state clearly that you did not sign these documents, that you have no knowledge of the business, and that any reliance on your credit is invalid." "And the deposit?" I asked. "The money they promised the landlord tomorrow." "We tell the landlord that no funds will be forthcoming and that any representation of your involvement is false." I sat there for 2 hours while Van drafted the letters. I watched the cursor blink. Every sentence was a brick and a wall I was building between me and the people who gave me life, to whom it may concern I, Nora Cook, formerly dispute. I did not authorize. The signatures are forgeries. It felt cold. It felt cruel. But then I remembered the empty chairs. I remembered the foam finger. I remembered my girl made it, so we all made it. I signed the letters. Bourne faxed them immediately. Legal offices still use fax machines for the timestamps and emailed digital copies to every contact we had found. "It is done," Van said, handing me the confirmation sheets. "The landlord has it. The bank has it. By tomorrow morning, the radioactive cloud will have settled over Victory Sundays. No one will touch that project." I drove home in a daze. It was almost midnight. The city of Columbus was asleep, but my mind was racing. I felt like I had just cut off my own arm to escape a trap. It hurt, but I was free. I walked into my apartment and locked the door. I threw my keys on the counter. I just wanted to sleep. I wanted to wake up and find out this was all a nightmare brought on by graduation stress. My phone rang. I looked at it, expecting Dad again, expecting more screaming, but it was a number I didn't recognize. A local Dayton area code. I answered wearily. "Hello, MS." "Guk." A man's voice, gruff, tired, and irritated. "This is Frank Miller. I own the property on 4th Street, the old steakhouse. The landlord." "Mr. Miller," I said, my grip tightening on the phone. "Did you receive the letter from my attorney?" "I did," he said. "About 20 minutes ago my fax machine woke me up." "I am sorry for the late hour," I said, "but it was urgent. I wanted to make sure you knew before any more time passed. I am not involved in that lease. That signature isn't mine." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear him breathing. "That is real interesting." "MS," Cook Miller said slowly, "because I was confused. I got your lawyer's letter saying it's all fraud and you aren't paying a dime." "That is correct." I said, "I am not right." Miller said, "But here is the thing. About 5 minutes after I got your lawyer's fax, I got an email from your mother." My blood ran cold. "What did she say?" "She sent me a screenshot." Miller said, "It looks like a bank confirmation. She said she just got off the phone, that you guys smoothed everything over, and that you authorized the wire transfer for the deposit. She said you were just having cold feet earlier, but you are fully on board now. She said the money will be in my account by 9 tomorrow morning." I closed my eyes. They weren't stopping. Even after the confrontation, even after I told them I knew everything, they were doubling down. They were lying to the landlord to buy themselves 12 more hours, hoping they could guilt or threaten me into sending the money before the bank opened. "Mr. Miller," I said, my voice steady and hard as diamond, "my mother is lying to you. There is no money coming. If you let them into that building, you will never see a dime of rent. The wire isn't happening." "I figured," Miller grunted, "but I thought you should know. She told me you were the one who insisted on the sports bar idea." She is selling you out to save her own skin." "I know," I said. "Thank you for the call." I hung up. I stood in the dark kitchen. They had tried to play me one last time. They thought if they promised the money, I would be too scared of the legal trouble to let them default. They thought I would panic and send the check to save face. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't the 18-year-old girl afraid of an overdraft fee anymore. I was a woman who had just hired a shark. And tomorrow morning, when that wire didn't hit, the doors to Victory Sundays were going to be locked tight. And my parents were going to be standing on the sidewalk explaining to their 50 VIP guests why the bank had closed. I walked into the Human Resources Department at Wexler and Breyer Solutions at 8:15 on Tuesday morning. I had been an employee there for exactly 1 week. Most people spend their first week trying to figure out how the coffee machine works or memorizing the names of the partners. I was spending mine filing a preemptive security report against my own parents. The HR director, a woman named Karen with kind eyes and a ruthlessly organized desk, listened as I explained the situation. I kept it clinical. I did not cry. I did not talk about the Super Bowl or the empty chairs at graduation. I simply stated that I was in the midst of a volatile financial dispute with arranged family members who might attempt to visit the office to cause a disturbance. "I would like to request that my name be flagged at the front desk," I said, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to hide the shaking. "No visitors without an appointment. If Gavin or Marler Cook arrive, please do not let them up. Just ask them to leave." Karen nodded, typing a note into my file. "We have strict protocols for this. Nora, you are safe here. The badge access is secure and security is in the lobby 247. We will handle it." I walked back to my cubicle feeling a strange mix of relief and nausea. I had built a firewall around my professional life. I thought that would be enough. I thought the glass doors and the security turnstiles would act as a filter, keeping the messiness of my Dayton away from the clean corporate air of Columbus. I was wrong. Walls only work if the people on the other side have shame. My parents had none left. It happened at 11:00. I was in the middle of an onboarding session with the data analytics team when the receptionist, a young guy named Tyler, messaged me on the internal chat. "Hi, Nora. There are 2 people in the lobby asking for you. They say they are your parents. I told them you were in a meeting, but they are refusing to leave. They are getting loud." My stomach dropped through the floor. They had driven up. They knew the wire transfer hadn't gone through Mr. Miller. The landlord must have called them to scream about the missing deposit, and instead of retreating, they had decided to launch a frontal assault. I stood up. "Excuse me," I said to the team lead. "I have to handle something urgent." I walked to the elevators. I pressed the button for the lobby. I didn't want them coming up. I had to go down to contain the blast radius. As the elevator doors slid open on the ground floor, I could hear them before I saw them. The lobby of Wexler and Breyer is a cavernous space of marble and glass designed to amplify the hushed whispers of important business deals. Instead, it was amplifying my father's shouting. "She is an employee here." Dad was yelling at the security guard, pointing a finger at the man's chest. "You can't keep parents from seeing their children. She has our money. She scammed us." People were stopping clients in expensive suits, couriers with packages, my own colleagues returning from coffee breaks. They were all watching. I stepped out of the elevator. "There she is!" Mom shrieked. She spotted me instantly. She was wearing her church coat, a wool blend she wore when she wanted to look respectable, but her face was twisted into a mask of frantic victimhood. "Nora, how could you do this to us?" I stopped 10 ft away from them. I didn't get closer. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of a physical altercation. "Dad, Mom," I said. My voice was low, forcing them to stop screaming if they wanted to hear me. "You need to leave, Leah." Dad laughed, a manic barking sound. He turned to the small crowd that had gathered. "Did you hear that? We drove 2 hours to see her. She promised to help us. She signed the papers. And now she locks us out like we are stray dogs. You tried to open a business in my name without my consent," I said. I didn't shout. I spoke with the flat, boring cadence of a court reporter. "I have disputed the charges. There is nothing to discuss here. You are a liar, Mom cried, tears streaming down her face. She fell to her knees, literally dropped to the marble floor in a heap of wool and melodrama. We sacrificed everything for you. We paid for your clothes. We fed you. And now that you have a big job, you think you are too good for us. You want to see your father go to jail over a misunderstanding. It was a performance, a grotesque, weaponized performance designed to inflict maximum social damage. She knew that in a corporate setting, the person crying is the victim and the person standing with a straight face is the villain. She wanted me to break. She wanted me to scream back, to look crazy, to look like the ungrateful daughter she was painting me to be. I looked at the receptionist, then at the security guard. I do not wish to speak to them, I said clearly. Please escort them out according to company protocol. Dad lunged forward, but the security guard, a burly man who had been waiting for the signal, stepped in his path. Sir, you need to go now. She is stealing our future. Dad screamed over the guard's shoulder. You are cold, Nora. You are ice cold. You will rot for this. Mom was still sobbing on the floor, wailing about a mother's love, until the second guard gently but firmly lifted her up by the arm. They were guided toward the revolving doors. Dad still shouting obscenities. Mom looking back at me with eyes that were sad but hateful. When the doors finally stopped spinning, the silence that rushed back into the lobby was deafening. I could feel 50 pairs of eyes on my back. The shame was a hot, prickly heat rising up my neck. I had wanted to be known for my work. Now I was the girl whose parents had to be dragged out by security. I turned to go back to the elevators, keeping my head high, acting like I wasn't bleeding internally. Nor, I froze. It was Diane Hall, my direct manager. She was standing near the turnstiles holding a tablet. She had seen the whole thing. I wanted to dissolve. I wanted to turn into vapor and vanish into the ventilation system. Diane, I stammered. I'm so sorry. I tried to warn HR. It won't happen again. I can explain. Stop, Diane said. She didn't look angry. She motioned for me to follow her. Come with me. We walked in silence to her office. It was a corner suite with a view of the city. She closed the door and pointed to the chair opposite her desk. I sat down, bracing myself for the termination talk. We can't have this kind of drama here. Nora, you are a liability. Diane sat on the edge of her desk, crossing her arms. She looked at me for a long moment. You don't need to explain anything to me. She said, I have been in management for 20 years. I know the difference between a bad employee and a bad situation. I blinked, fighting back the tears that were threatening to spill now that the adrenaline was fading. They have some financial trouble. They are trying to drag me into it. I gathered that, Diane said dryly. When someone screams, she scammed us in a lobby while wearing a windbreaker that costs less than their lunch, it usually means the opposite is true. She leaned forward. Listen to me, Nora. You are doing good work here. Your analysis on the Kensington file was sharp. That is all I care about. But you need to protect yourself. Companies like this. We are a fortress. You are safe inside these walls. But outside, you need to make sure you are just as fortified. I am trying, I whispered. Don't try. Do, she said firmly. If you need time to meet with lawyers, take it. If you need to change your number, do it. But do not let them make you feel small in this building. You earned your seat here. They are just tourists. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat so large I couldn't speak. In 5 minutes, this woman, my boss of 1 week, had shown me more support than my parents had in 29 years. I went back to my desk. But the battle wasn't over. It had just moved to a different front. My phone, which I had silenced, was vibrating incessantly against the desktop. I turned it over. I had 34 new notifications, text messages, Facebook Messenger alerts, missed calls. The smear campaign had begun. My aunt, not Sloan, but Dad's sister, Karen, had texted Nora. I just got off the phone with your father. He is distraught. He said you tricked them into signing a confession and then called the police on their business. How could you be so cruel? They are family. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. A rich girl gets a big job and forgets where she came from. Nice luck, Nor. Another uncle. Your mother says they are going to lose the house because of you. I hope you can sleep at night." They were spinning the narrative. They were telling everyone a version of the story where I was the villain, the wealthy, educated daughter who had promised to fund their dream and then pulled the rug out at the last second out of spite. They left out the part about the forgery. They left out the identity theft. They left out the lease I never signed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to reply to every single message with the PDF of the credit report. But I knew that arguing in the comment section of a family tragedy was a losing game. I needed an ally, a real one, someone who knew the history. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Aunt Sloan, my mother's younger sister, the one who had posted the Super Bowl video. She was the family gossip, yes, but she was also the only one who had ever been remotely critical of my parents' spending habits. I walked to the break room, checking to make sure it was empty, and dialed her number. "Nor," Sloan answered on the second ring. She sounded hesitant. I heard there was a scene. They came to my office. "Sloan," I said, my voice shaking. They screamed at me in front of my boss. They were escorted out by security. "Oh, Lord," Sloan sighed. "I told Mara that was a bad idea. I told her you wouldn't crack under pressure like that. They are telling everyone I scammed them," I said. "They are saying I promised to pay for the bar." "I know what they are saying," Sloan said, quietly. "They are saying a lot of things. But Nora, there is something you need to know. Something that has been eating at me since I saw that video of them partying while you were graduating." "What is it?" "You remember your Nanner's bonds, the ones she bought when you were born?" I frowned. Narner didn't leave me anything. Mom told me she died with nothing but debt. They had to pay for the funeral. Sloan let out a bitter, sharp laugh. "That is a lie. Mom left you $10,000 in Series E savings bonds. They were in your name, but Mara was the custodian until you turned 18. I gripped the edge of the counter. "I never saw them." "Of course you didn't," Sloan said, "because Mara cashed them when you were 14. She told the family she needed it for orthodontics for you, but you didn't get braces until you were 16, and you paid for half of them with your pretzel stand money, didn't you?" The memory hit me. The arguments about the braces. My parents telling me they couldn't afford them unless I chipped in. "She spent it?" I asked. "She and Gavin went to Cancun that year." Sloan said, "Remember the second honeymoon? That was your college fund. Nor, that was your Narner's money." I closed my eyes. It wasn't just the car savings. It wasn't just the graduation. It wasn't just the identity theft for the bar. They had been cannibalizing my future since I was a child. They had stolen the gift my grandmother left me and used it to get tans while I worked for minimum wage to fix my own teeth. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. "Because I am a coward," Sloan admitted, "and because family keeps secrets, but after seeing them destroy your graduation, and now this, I am done keeping their secrets. They are vampires. Nora, they won't stop until you have nothing left to give." "Thank you, Sloan," I said. "Thank you for the truth." I hung up. The sadness was gone. The embarrassment from the lobby was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard resolve. I went back to my desk. I opened my personal email. I drafted a new message. Subject: the truth about the loan and Victory Sundays to BCC. Every aunt, uncle, and cousin in the contact list. I know you are all hearing stories about what happened today. I know I am being painted as ungrateful. I will not argue with you over text message. I will not engage in a shouting match. My parents used my social security number to open fraudulent loans and sign a commercial lease for over $400,000 in my name without my knowledge. They forged my signature. They diverted my mail to hide it. I have the credit reports. I have the forged lease. I have the affidavit from the bank. I have the statement from my Aunt Sloan regarding the theft of my grandmother's savings bonds 15 years ago. If anyone wants to see the truth, come to my apartment this Sunday. I will lay the documents on the table. If you prefer to believe the lies because they are louder, that is your choice. But do not contact me again unless you are ready to read the paperwork. I hit send. I sat back watching the message sent notification fade. I had just dropped a bomb on the family structure. I had invited them to a funeral, the funeral of their denial. My phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from Mom. She must have seen the email. Or maybe she just sensed that she was losing control. If you don't transfer that money by 500 today, I am going to call your university. I will tell them you paid someone to write your thesis. I will tell them you cheated your way to that degree. I know who to call. Nora, I will ruin your reputation if you don't save ours. I stared at the screen. It was the nuclear option. She was threatening to attack the one thing that was purely mine, my education. She was willing to burn my entire career to the ground just to spite me for closing the wallet. But she forgot one thing. I wrote every word of that thesis. I pulled every all-nighter. I had the drafts, the research notes, the edit logs. She was bluffing with an empty gun. But the fact that she pulled the trigger at all told me everything I needed to know. I didn't reply. I just took a screenshot. Add to folder. I thought evidence. The conference room at Elliot Vaughan's office did not smell like coffee or old leather anymore. It smelled like ozone and hot toner. We had spent the last 48 hours building a paper fortress, brick by brick, document by document. This was no longer about a family dispute. This was an autopsy of my financial identity. Van laid the timeline out on the long mahogany table. It looked less like a legal case and more like a battle map. We have the credit report from Experian, Vaughan said, placing a thick stack of paper on the left. We have the connection logs from your email provider showing the forwarding rule was created from an IP address in Dayton, specifically an IP address registered to a residential account at your parents' address. He placed a second stack down. We have the notarized affidavit from the bank stating that the voice on the verification call was female, but failed the secondary voice biometrics test they run in the background. And we have the commercial lease agreement with the forged signature. I looked at the table. It was my life reduced to evidence. It was cold. It was clinical. And it was exactly what I needed. For years, I had fought my parents with emotion. I had fought them with guilt, with anger, with pleas for boundaries. I had lost every single time because they were masters of emotional jujitsu. They could take my anger and turn it into their victimhood. They could take my sadness and turn it into my selfishness. But they could not argue with a timestamp. They could not gaslight an IP address. We filed a police report this afternoon, Van said. Then we send the dispute package to the credit bureaus. Once the police report number is attached, the bureaus are legally required to block the debt from your record within 4 days. Do it, I said. My next stop was the bank. Not the local branch, but the regional headquarters downtown. I sat with a fraud specialist named Sarah. She was young, sharp, and entirely unamused by the story I told her. We are going to scrub everything, Sarah said. New account numbers, new debit cards. But Nora, we need to change your security protocol. They know your mother's maiden name. They know your first pet. They know the street you grew up on. I know. I said, they don't just know the answers. They are the answers. We went through the list. Question: what is your mother's middle name? Old answer, Jean. New answer, Lou 79 kilowatt. Question: what was the make of your first car? Old answer, Toyota. New answer, correct horse battery staple. I didn't use real answers. I used passphrases generated by a randomizer app on my phone. I severed the narrative link. My parents could no longer access my life by knowing my history. They were locked out by randomness. It felt like I was physically changing the locks on a house they had walked into freely for 29 years. By Wednesday afternoon, the silence from Dayton broke. They realized the game had changed. The landlord, Mr. Miller, must have called them to say the deal was dead. The bank must have called to say the loan was frozen pending a fraud investigation. My phone lit up. It wasn't a threat this time. It wasn't a demand. Nor, please, we need to talk. We can fix this. Don't let them arrest your father. Then another. We will pay it back. We have a plan. Just meet us, please. They were terrified, not because they had hurt me, but because the real world has consequences that tears cannot wash away. I texted back Thursday, 10 in the morning, the UPS store on Fifth Avenue. They have a notary public. Bring your ID. I chose a notary office for a reason. It was sterile. It was public. And, most importantly, it was a place where official witnesses watched you sign your name. There would be no I didn't understand what I was signing later. I arrived 10 minutes early. The UPS store was quiet, smelling of cardboard and packing tape. The notary was a middle-aged woman named Brinder, who looked like she had seen everything and was impressed by none of it. I paid her the fee in advance to reserve the conference cubicle in the back. When my parents walked in, they looked smaller than they had in the lobby of my office building. The bravado was gone. Dad was wearing a baseball cap pulled low, his shoulders slumped. Mom was carrying a large battered shoe box. They sat down across from me. Brenda stood by the door, pretending to sort mail, but clearly listening. Mom started, her voice trembling. She placed the shoe box on the table. I brought this. I thought we should look at some things before we talk business. She opened the lid. It was filled with papers, old photos. My kindergarten report card, a macaroni necklace I had made when I was 5, and mixed in with the sentimental debris were random financial documents, an old savings bond stub, a receipt for a dryer they bought in 1909. Look, she said, pulling out a photo of me at Disney World. Remember this. We drove all night to get you there. We slept in the car so you could have the park hopper pass. It was a classic move, the confusion box. She was trying to mix the memories of their parenting with the reality of their finances, trying to blur the lines so I would feel that their debt was the price of my childhood happiness. She wanted me to look at the macaroni necklace and forget the forged lease. I didn't look at the box. I opened my laptop and spun it around to face them. I am not here to reminisce, Mom, I said. I am here to look at the math. I pulled up a spreadsheet I had created the night before. It was simple. 2 columns, date of activity and event. This is the timeline, I said, pointing to the screen. January 24th, 11 in the morning. An application is submitted to QuickBridge Capital for $14,500. Using my social security number, I hit the down arrow key. January 24th, 2 in the afternoon, a deposit of $4,000 is paid to Big Game Catering LLC for a Super Bowl package. The payment method, a digital check issued by QuickBridge Capital. I looked at Dad. He was staring at the table, his jaw working tight. That is the money you stole, I said. You didn't use it to pay bills. You didn't use it to save the house. You used the loan you took out in my name to pay for the party you went to instead of my graduation. It was a business expense, Dad mumbled. The party was for the bar to get investors. And the bar? I asked. I brought up the next document. The lease agreement. February 2nd. You signed a personal guarantee for $430,000 of liability over 3 years. You signed Nora Cook, but you spelled my middle name wrong on the initial block. Dad looked up, his eyes flashing with a sudden, desperate anger. It was a mistake, a clerical error. I was rushing. You don't accidentally sign someone else's name, Dad, I said, and you certainly don't accidentally spell your daughter's name wrong unless you are panicking. It is all coincidence, he insisted. The dates, the signatures, it is just a mess. We can explain it to the bank. We don't need lawyers. Coincidence doesn't sign my name. Dad, I said, my voice rising just enough to cut through his bluster. Coincidence doesn't set up email forwarding rules to hide bank alerts. Coincidence doesn't verify security questions about my first car. I reached into my bag and pulled out a document. It was not the support agreement from the diner. This was different. This was an affidavit of forgery and admission of liability. Here is the choice. I said, Option A. You sign this document. In it, you admit that you forged my signature on the lease and the loan without my knowledge. You agree to assume full responsibility for the debt. We take this to the landlord and the bank. They will close the accounts. You will be on the hook for the money, not me. I won't press criminal charges if you sign this and set up a payment plan with the creditors directly. I paused. Option B, you don't sign. I walk out of here. I hand this entire file to the detective who is waiting for my call at the 1st precinct, and you get arrested for felony identity theft and wire fraud before you make it back to the highway. The room was silent. The only sound was the hum of the photocopier in the front of the store. Mom looked at the document, then at the shoebox of memories. She reached for the macaroni necklace, her fingers shaking. You would send your father to prison, she whispered. Over money? We are your flesh and blood. I am not sending him to prison, I said. He sent himself to prison when he signed my name. I am offering him a way out. It is not fair, Mom cried. You have so much. You have the big degree. You have the fancy job. Why do you care about a few thousand? We were going to make it back. The bar was going to be huge. The bar was a lie. Mom, I slammed my hand on the table. It was a fantasy built on my credit score. You were never going to pay it back because you have never paid anything back in your lives. Dad stood up. He knocked the chair back. His face was purple. You ungrateful little brat, he shouted. Brander, the notary, took a step forward, her hand reaching for the phone. We did everything for you. We pushed you. We made you who you are. You made me fearful. I shot back. You made me a nervous wreck who checks her bank account 3 times a day because she's afraid it will be empty. That is what you made me. If it wasn't for that degree of yours, we wouldn't have had to open the damn place. Dad yelled. The words hung in the air like smoke. I froze. What did you say? Dad was breathing hard, his chest heaving. He realized he had said too much, but his anger pushed him over the edge. You heard me. He spat. The degree, the master's, everyone was talking about it. Oh, the cooks have a genius daughter. Oh, Nora is going to be rich. We had to look the part. Nora, we couldn't be the poor parents of the rich girl. We had to have something to show for it. We needed the bar so we could look like we belonged in your world. I stared at him. The revelation hit me with the force of a physical blow. They hadn't stolen from me because they were desperate for cash. They hadn't done it just to survive. They had done it because my success made them feel inadequate. My graduation wasn't a moment of pride for them. It was a mirror showing them their own failures. They used my degree as the bait for the investors. Yes, but they also used my credit to build a stage where they could pretend to be on my level. They were competing with me. They were trying to buy status with my own money so they wouldn't feel small next to their daughter. So I said, my voice dangerously quiet, you stole from me because you were jealous. Not jealous. Mom interjected, terrified by the truth on the table. Proud. We wanted to match you. No, I said, you wanted to own me. You wanted to make sure that no matter how high I climbed, I would always be dragged back down to the split level in Dayton with the debt and the bad decisions. I pushed the paper toward them. Sign it, I said. Right now, or I make the call. Dad looked at the door. He looked at me. He saw the end of the line. There was no more guilt to mine. There was no more love to leverage. There was only the cold, hard light of the law. He sat down. He picked up the pen. I will never forgive you for this, he muttered as he signed his name. I know, I said. That is why I am free. The fallout was not an explosion. It was a slow, suffocating smog that settled over my entire extended family. In the 48 hours after I forced my parents to sign the admission of forgery, the narrative shifted. My parents, realizing they had signed away their legal defense, switched to the court of public opinion. They didn't tell people they had signed a confession. They told people I had blackmailed them. They told my aunts and cousins that I had threatened to put my own father in handcuffs over a misunderstanding about a loan they intended to pay back. My phone became a repository of hate. You only care about money. How can you be so cold to the people who raised you? Your mother is sick with worry. You are killing her. I didn't block them. I let the messages pile up like unread mail. I didn't engage in text battles. I didn't try to explain the intricacies of the Fair Credit Reporting Act to a cousin who was halfway through a keg of beer. I sent one message, a single group text to the entire Cook family tree. If you want to know why I did what I did, come to Uncle Jerry's house on Sunday at 1:00 in the afternoon. I will not speak about this again. Sunday was the day the family always gathered. It was the off week before the next big sporting event, a time usually reserved for leftovers and low-stakes poker. Uncle Jerry's house in Dayton was the neutral ground, the Switzerland of our family, mostly because Jerry had a 70 in television and didn't ask questions. I arrived at 1250. I didn't come alone. Elliot Vaughan drove his own car, parking right next to mine. He wore a charcoal suit that looked out of place among the pickup trucks and SUVs in the driveway. He wasn't there to litigate. He was there to be a visual anchor of reality. As I walked up the driveway, I saw Mom waiting on the porch. She was wearing a cardigan I had bought her for Christmas 2 years ago, wrapped tight around her body. She looked frail. It was a calculated frailty. She rushed down the steps before I could reach the door. "Nora," she hissed, her voice low and desperate. She reached for my arm, but I sidestepped. "You don't have to do this. Just turn around. Dad and we will figure it out. We will pay you back eventually. Just tell them we made up. Tell them you were just stressed." "No," I said. "Please," she begged, her eyes darting to the lawyer behind me. "They are your family. If you humiliate us in front of them, we will never recover. Just transfer the money for the deposit, and we can pretend this week never happened." She was still asking for the money, even with the confession signed, even with the police report pending. She thought she could charm the cash out of me to save face. "I am not here to negotiate, Mom," I said. "I am here to testify." I walked past her and opened the front door. The living room was full. My aunts, uncles, cousins, about 20 people were crammed onto the sofas and folding chairs. The TV was on, but muted. When I walked in, the room went silent. It wasn't a respectful silence. It was the heavy, judgmental silence of a jury that had already decided the verdict. I walked to the coffee table. There was a bowl of pretzels and a few beer bottles. I pushed them aside. "Nora, we don't need a scene," Uncle Jerry said from his recliner. He looked uncomfortable. "Your dad said you guys are having a spat. Just work it out." "It isn't a spat, Uncle Jerry." I said, "It is a felony." I opened my briefcase. I didn't start with a speech. I didn't talk about my feelings or how much it hurt to see empty chairs at my graduation. I knew this crowd. They didn't respect feelings. They respected scoreboards. I laid the first document down. "This," I said, pointing to the paper, "is a loan application for $14,500. It was submitted at 11 in the morning on the day of my graduation." I laid the second document down. "This is the IP log. It shows the application came from this house, from Dad's computer." I laid the third document down. "This is the email verification. You can see the timestamp. While I was walking across the stage to get my diploma, my mother was clicking I agree on a high-interest loan using my Social Security number." I looked around the room. A few cousins were leaning in. Aunt Sloan, who was sitting in the corner, nodded slowly. "So what?" My cousin Mike spoke up. He was wearing a jersey holding the beer. "They'd borrowed some cash. They raised you. You make good money now. Why are you acting like the FBI?" "Because," I said, placing the fourth document on the table, the admission they had signed at the notary office. "They didn't ask, they stole, and they didn't use it to pay bills." I pulled out the timeline spreadsheet. "They used $4,000 of that stolen money to buy the VIP package for the Super Bowl party you all saw on Facebook. They skipped my ceremony to spend my credit." The room shifted. The ungrateful daughter narrative was hitting a wall of hard data. "Is that true?" Aunt Karen asked, looking at Mom, who had followed me in and was standing by the door, pale and shaking. "Mara, you said the party was a gift from a client." Mom didn't answer. She just wept, burying her face in her hands. "We were doing it for the family. We were building a legacy." Dad stepped out from the kitchen. He looked furious. He marched toward me, his face red. "That is enough," he shouted. "You have made your point. Now get out. You come into my brother's house and air our dirty laundry. You are sick." He reached for my arm, trying to physically pull me away from the table. "We are going to talk about this outside alone now." It was the old move: isolate and intimidate. Drag me to the garage or the car, where nobody could hear the threats. "I am not going anywhere with you," I said, planting my feet. "You are my daughter and you will listen to me," he roared, grabbing my elbow hard enough to bruise. "Let go of her." The voice didn't come from me. It came from the doorway. We all turned. Megan Price was standing there, and next to her, looking impeccably sharp in a trench coat, was Diane Hall, my boss. I had texted Megan the location. I didn't know she would bring Diane, but seeing them there, my best friend and the woman who had known me for a week, yet defended me more than my father ever had, broke something open in my chest. It wasn't a break of sadness. It was a break of light. Who the hell are you? Dad demanded, though he released my arm. I am the person who watched Nora walk across the stage while you were drinking beer, Megan said, her voice shaking with rage. And I am the one who drove her home while she cried. And I am her employer, Diane said, stepping forward. Her voice was calm, corporate, and terrifying. And I am a witness to the harassment she has endured at her place of work. If you touch her again, I will have the police here in 3 minutes. The room was dead silent. My family stared at these strangers. They looked at Diane's expensive coat, at Megan's fierce loyalty. They looked back at me, standing straight. No longer the little girl they could guilt trip. This isn't family business anymore, I said to the room. This is legal business. I gestured to Elliot Vaughan. Tell them, I said. Van stepped up to the coffee table. He didn't look at the family. He looked at the papers. We have a signed confession, Van said. We have the forensic evidence. The fraud is not a matter of opinion. It is a matter of record. Nora has assumed zero liability for these debts. The creditors are now pursuing Gavin and Mara Cook directly, one of the older uncles, a man named Bob, who had worked in a factory for 40 years and valued $1 above almost anything else, leaned forward. He picked up the timeline sheet. He put on his reading glasses. He looked at the date of the loan. He looked at the date of the party payment. Gavin, Uncle Bob said, his voice growly. Did you really do this? Did you really skip the girl's graduation to go to a tailgate and pay for it by signing her name? It was an investment, Dad argued. But his voice cracked. We were opening a bar, Victory Sundays. It was going to pay for everything. You stole from her, Uncle Bob said, dropping the paper back onto the table. It made a sharp slat sound. That ain't borrowing. That ain't parenting. That is stealing. He looked at me. I am sorry, Nora. I didn't know that was the crack in the dam. Once Uncle Bob said it, the energy in the room inverted. The cousins put down their beers. The aunts stopped looking at Mom with pity and started looking at her with confusion and disgust. They realized they had been played, too. They had been sold a story of an ungrateful daughter to cover up a crime. Dad looked around the room. He saw the support evaporating. He saw his reputation, the one thing he valued more than me, crumbling in real time. You are happy now, ha? He spat at me. You ruined us. You wanted to be the winner. Fine, you win. We have nothing. Are you happy? I am not happy, I said. I am safe. There is a difference. I reached into my briefcase one last time. I pulled out a thick white envelope. And Dad, I said, you said you were doing this to build a legacy to open the bar. I tossed the envelope onto the table. It slid across the wood and stopped right in front of him. What is this? He asked. That is the termination. Notice from the landlord, I said, and the demand letter for the refund of the equipment rental. Dad went pale. You canceled it. I didn't just cancel it. I said I liquidated it. I looked him in the eye. You thought you could use my name to anchor your sinking ship, but you forgot that when you forge a signature, the person you forged it from has the power to revoke it. I called the landlord. I called the suppliers. I told them the truth. The deal is dead. The lease is void. And the money you scraped together for the deposit, Mr. Miller is writing a check to return it. Thank you, Mom breathed, thinking I had saved them the money. Don't thank me, I said, because I instructed Mr. Miller to write the refund check to the name on the lease. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. The check is coming to me, I said, because according to the paperwork you signed, I am the tenant. Dad's eyes bulged. That is our money. We scraped that cash together. That was everything we had left. No, I said, shaking my head. That was the down payment on a fraudulent loan you took out in my name. That money belongs to QuickBridge Capital. And as soon as that check clears, I am sending it back to the lender to pay down the principal of the debt you stuck me with. I picked up my briefcase. You aren't getting a refund, I said. You aren't getting a bar and you aren't getting a daughter. I turned to Megan and Diane. I am ready to go. Wait, Dad screamed. You can't leave us like this. We have nothing. You have to help us. I stopped at the door. I looked back at the room full of people who had watched me grow up, who had watched me be ignored for 20 years, and who had finally seen the truth. I am helping you, I said. I am teaching you the one thing you never taught me. What is that? Uncle Bob asked softly. Consequences, I said, and then I walked out. I did not stop walking when my father screamed. I did not stop when my mother began to wail, a sound that was less about sorrow and more about the performative grief of a woman realizing her audience had left the theater. But I did pause on the porch steps, my hand on the cold iron railing, because there was one final piece of the demolition that had to be confirmed. I turned back. The front door was still open. My parents had followed me out, dragging the heavy atmosphere of the living room with them behind them. Uncle Bob and Aunt Sloane stood in the doorway, blocking the view of the flickering television screen where the pregame show was just starting. "You can't do this," Dad yelled, his face a map of panic and red blotches. "You froze the accounts. You sent the money back to the lender. That refund was our lifeline. We have vendors to pay. We have contractors who will sue us." "They won't sue you," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the quiet suburban lawn, because I already called them. I saw the color drain from his face, leaving it a sickly shade of gray. "I sent the notices of an authorized signature to the equipment rental company and the interior design firm this morning," I continued. "I attached the police report number. I told them that Victory Sunday Sports Lounge does not exist and that any contracts signed under the name Nora Cook are invalid due to fraud. They aren't going to sue you, Dad. They are just coming to take their fryers and televisions back today." "Today," Mom gasped, "but the neighbors will see the trucks." I looked at her, even at the edge of ruin. Her primary concern was the optical integrity of her reputation in the cul-de-sac. "Yes," I said, "they will." "You are killing us," Mom screamed, throwing her hands up. "You are killing your own parents. How can you be so vicious? We raised you. We gave you life. And now you are drowning us." "No," I said. The word was simple, but it felt heavy, like a stone dropping into a deep well. "I am not drowning you. I am just refusing to be the life raft you poke holes in." "What does that mean?" Dad spat. "Don't speak in riddles. You think you are so smart with your fancy degree. It means I was the plan. I said I was never the daughter. I was the contingency plan. I was the retirement fund. I was the credit score. And for 29 years, I let you draft off me. I let you take the wind out of my sails so you could feel like you were moving. But I am done floating you. If you sink now, it is because you never learned to swim." Dad took a step down the porch stairs. He looked menacing, but also small. The power dynamic had shifted so radically that he didn't know how to navigate the space between us. "You think you are better than us," he sneered. "Is that it? You got that piece of paper. You got that job in the city. And now you look down on us. You think you are better than the people who wiped your nose." I looked him in the eye. I didn't blink. I didn't feel the old urge to apologize, to shrink, to make myself smaller so he could feel big. "No," I said. "I don't think I am better than you. I just think I am a person, and I think I deserve to be treated like a human being, not a resource. I deserve to have a name that isn't just a signature on a loan application." He opened his mouth to argue, but I wasn't finished. I reached into my bag and pulled out a copy of the document we had signed at the diner 3 days ago. "The family support agreement. Do you remember this?" I asked, holding it up. "Yeah," Dad scoffed. "The paper you tricked us into signing. You said you would send the money if we signed it." "I said I would consider the transfer," I corrected. "But you didn't read it, Dad. You were so hungry for the cash. You just signed." I unfolded the paper. Paragraph 4. I read aloud. "The undersigned acknowledged that the debt of $14,500 originated on January 24th is the sole responsibility of Gavin and Mara Cook, and that Nora Cook acted only as an involuntary vehicle for said funds due to misrepresentation." I looked at them. "You didn't just sign a receipt. I said you signed a confession. You admitted the debt is yours. And because you signed this, and because I have the notary log from Thursday where you admitted to the forgery, the bank has everything they need." Dad stared at the paper. He looked like he had stepped into a bear trap he had set for someone else. "You set us up," he whispered. "No," I said. "I just turned on the lights. You set yourselves up when you thought I was too stupid or too scared to read the fine print." A silence fell over the lawn. It was broken only by the sound of a car door closing. Uncle Bob had walked out onto the porch. He didn't look at my parents. He looked at me. "Go home, Nora," he said gently. "You did what you had to do." "Bob," Mom cried, turning to him. "Talk to her. Tell her she is wrong." Uncle Bob shook his head. He took a sip of his beer, his eyes looking tired. "She ain't wrong, Mar. You guys, you went too far. You can't eat your own young." Mom looked around. Aunt Sloane had turned her back and was walking back inside the house. The cousins were drifting away from the window. The united front of the Cook family had fractured. They weren't rallying around the victims anymore because they finally saw who the victims actually were. My parents stood alone on the concrete steps. No backup, no money, no bar. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to run up and fix it. I didn't feel the need to offer a solution. "Nora," Dad said. His voice was cracked, devoid of the rage from moments before. It was the voice of a man realizing the winter is coming and he has burned all his firewood. "If you leave, if you do this, don't come back, you are out. You hear me? You are out of this family." It was supposed to be a threat. It was supposed to be the ultimate punishment. Exclusion, exile. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, but it was a genuine one. "Dad," I said softly, "I left this family the moment I looked down from that stage and saw those empty chairs. I just came back today to pick up my dignity." I turned to Megan and Diane. "Let's go." "One last thing," I said, pausing by the car door. I looked back at them one final time. "My graduation ceremony didn't need you there to make it real. I earned that degree whether you watched it or not. But my life, my actual life, it needs you to stop stealing from it so I can finally start living it." I got into the car. I slammed the door. The sound was final, like the closing of a heavy book. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced at the digital clock on the dashboard. It was 1:30. The kickoff for the Super Bowl was in 30 minutes. My parents were standing on the driveway arguing with each other. Mom was crying, pointing at Dad. Dad was kicking a stone, shouting at the sky. They were missing the game. The event they had destroyed my trust for, the spectacle they had sacrificed me to attend, was about to start, and they were standing outside in the cold, miserable and broke. I didn't stay to watch. I put the car in drive and turned onto the main road. The drive back to Columbus was quiet. Megan and Diane followed me for the first 10 miles, a convoy of protection before peeling off, with waves and flashes of headlights. When we reached the city limits, I was alone in my car. But the silence wasn't the heavy, suffocating kind I had felt the week before. It was clean. It was the silence of a wide open field after a thunderstorm. I thought about the last 10 days. I thought about the shock, the investigation, the betrayal. I thought about the lawyer's office and the bank fraud department. It felt like I had lived a decade in a week. I was exhausted, my bones aching with a deep spiritual fatigue, but my mind was razor sharp. I arrived at my apartment. The sun was setting, casting long orange streaks across the brick buildings. I walked up the stairs, my keys jingling in my hand. I opened the door. The air inside was still and cool. It smelled of lemon pledge and coffee. It was my space. My rent was paid. My lights were on. And for the first time, I knew that no one was monitoring my mail. No one was watching my bank account. I walked to the closet and pulled out the large, stiff envelope I had thrown in there on graduation day, the one I hadn't had the heart to look at. I carried it to the living room. I sat on the beige sofa. I opened the flap. I pulled out the diploma, the Ohio State University, Master of Science, Nora Cook. The gold seal caught the last light of the day. It looked beautiful. I didn't cry. I didn't feel a surge of triumphant joy. Real victory isn't cinematic. It doesn't come with swelling violins. Real victory is quiet. It is the absence of fear. It is the absence of the waiting for the other shoe to drop. I stood up and cleared a space on the top shelf of my bookcase. Moving aside a stack of textbooks, I propped the diploma up against the wall. It stood there, solitary and solid. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I looked at it. It wasn't my parents'. It was a notification from my bank app. "Your weekly credit score update is available." I didn't swipe it away. I opened it. Credit score frozen. I smiled. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights coming on. Somewhere in Dayton, a game was being played. Crowds were cheering. People were winning and losing. But here in this quiet room, the game was over. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that felt entirely my own. I don't have a family anymore, I whispered to the glass. The words hung there for a second. No, I corrected myself. I don't have hostages anymore. I turned away from the window and went to the kitchen to make tea. I wasn't lonely. I was free. And after 29 years of paying for love that never arrived, freedom felt like the greatest wealth in the world. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to relive, but I hope it helps someone out there realize that you don't have to set yourself on fire just to keep others warm, even if they are family. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life revenge dramas, please subscribe to the Azad Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so this story can reach more people who might need to hear it. And I would love to know, where are you listening from today? Drop a comment below with your city or country. Let's share our thoughts and support each other in the comment section. Stay strong and stay free. Thanks to all.